Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our new career development webinar entitled Re-examining Your Mentoring Relationship in the Current Moment. Let's get everyone settled just for a little bit to make sure we're all logged in, and then we'll get started. We do want to let everyone know that this webinar will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. Before we get started, I'll be giving a brief intro about NRMN, the National Research Mentoring Network, and our speakers, Dr. Christine Pfund and Dr. Ruth Gotian. Founded in 2014, NRMN is an NIH grant-funded initiative whose entire purpose is to diversify the STEM workforce. We do this by providing researchers across all career stages in the biomedical, behavior, clinical, and social sciences field with evidence-based mentorship and professional development programming that emphasizes the benefits and challenges of diversity, inclusivity, and culture. Our program achieves that through mentorship, networking, and professional development through our online networking platform, MyNRMN, which has over 19,000 mentors and mentees. We encourage you to visit our website, nrmnnet.net, to learn more about our resources. NRMN is happy to have Dr. Christine Pfund and Dr. Ruth Gotian to join us for today's webinar. Dr. Pfund is a senior scientist with the Wisconsin Center for Education Research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Pfund's work focuses on optimizing mentoring relationships. Dr. Pfund is the principal investigator of the NRMN Coordination Center. She's also director of the Center for the Improvement of Mentored Experience and Research at UW-Madison. She is also a member of the National Academy's committee that recently published the consensus report and online guide, The Science of Effective Mentorship in STEM. Dr. Ruth Gotian is the Chief Learning Officer and Assistant Professor of Education and Anesthesiology and former Assistant Dean of Mentoring and Executive Director of the Mentoring Academy at Weill Cornell Medicine. She has been hailed by the Journal of Nature and Columbia University as an expert in mentorship and leadership development. Her research is about the mindset and skill set of peak performers, including Nobel laureates, astronauts, and Olympic champions. Her forthcoming book, The Success Factor, will be out in January. NRMN is delighted to provide this opportunity for everyone to participate in this webinar and have your questions directly answered about re-examining your mentoring relationship. There will be polls throughout this webinar, and we will also be offering a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So we encourage you to type any questions you may have in the Q&A feature down below. From NRMN, we want to give a special thank you to Dr. Christine Pfund and Dr. Ruth Gotian for making this webinar happen. And now I'll pass it over to Dr. Pfund to begin the webinar.
Thanks so much, Johnny, and thanks to NRMN Resource Center for this opportunity. It's wonderful to see some familiar faces here with us today. I can't see your faces, but I see your names in the participant window. And I'm really excited to partner with a wonderful new collaborator, Dr. Ruth Gotian. We've just started working together, although we've watched each other's work for a long time. And this is the first time we've teamed up for this opportunity. So very excited to be working together. So I'm going to get us started and let me share my screen. All right. So what Ruth and I thought might be a useful activity today is to really take a moment, just an hour together, to re-examine our mentoring relationships in the current moment. Now, you might be coming to this thinking that you want to use the perspective as a mentee. You might be an undergraduate, you might be a junior faculty member, you might be working in a different context, or you might have your hat on as a mentor, or your work supports mentoring relationships. Whatever perspective you're coming from, I think that in the last year and a half in particular, that it's really important to take a moment, take a breath as we come into this new season, this new semester, and really ask ourselves, what does mentorship look like in this current moment? And what might we need to reassess and reexamine? So in order to do that, we're going to take a couple minutes and use polls to get to know you a bit. Then we're going to talk a bit about the stress of transitions, which probably feels pretty salient to all of us, but we're going to walk through some of those specifics. Then we're going to talk about a framework for really re-examining your mentoring relationships, which includes moments of reassessing, realigning, and reimagining. And then we're going to talk about mentorship in the current moment and provide some advice to mentors and mentees, but also open it up to you to share your experiences and your approaches with the community. And hopefully from that collection of sharing, we'll be able to post some additional advice on the Resource Center website. And then we'll hopefully have some time for discussion. So we're going to do a series of polls to get a sense of who's with us today. So our first poll, and I'll get this running in a second, is just indicate your previous engagement with the NRMN webinars. And so this might be your first webinar, and we're thrilled to have you here, and or you may not remember, or you may regularly attend. So please let us know, and then we're already at about 70%. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. All right, we're just about 90%. We'll give you another 10 seconds. All right, and Ruth, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the results? You cannot. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share those results. How about now? Perfect. All right. So wonderful. Half of you, this is the first time we've had you at an NRMN webinar. So welcome. We hope this is not your last. And for the rest of you, we've seen many people who have at least attended one, and about 10% or 12% who regularly attend. And then some of you have seen some online or can't recall. So thanks. All right, so our second question is career stage. So let's see who's with us today. Where are you in your career? Give you about 10 seconds. We're at just 90%. All right. So we have about the majority, 43% are faculty members. So you're probably wearing primarily your mentor hat, but you might also be wearing your mentee hat. And then welcome also to our postdoctoral researchers and our graduate students, both of whom often wear both hats as mentor and mentee. And then we also welcome our researchers and scientists and program administrators and directors who often end up in the position of supporting mentorship and mentoring relationships, as well as the one person from another role. All right, so our next question is about the role you're currently playing. So we might make some guesses based on your career stage, but they may be completely inaccurate. So what role do you see yourself playing? Give you another 10 seconds. All right. So we have lots of folks wearing both hats. And then we've got about 33% of you wearing your mentor hat, a few folks wearing just their mentee hat, and then a lot of folks supporting mentorship. So Ruth and I are going to try our best today to speak across those roles. But when we switch to one role or another, we ask you to extrapolate to your context in whatever way makes sense to you. All right, so we have one more introductory poll, and this is where you're working right now. So whether you're a mentee, mentor, supporting mentorship, where are you working right? Are you on site? Are you remote? Are you hybrid? Are you all over the place? Every day seems like a new adventure. Sometimes I wake up and I say, where am I today? All right, a couple more seconds. Thanks for everybody engaging. Love getting over 90% on these polls. All right. So we have folks working all over the board, lots of hybrid, lots of on-site, lots of remote, all over the place. And this is going to be really significant as we talk about where you're working and what implications does that have for your mentoring relationships and your mentoring activities. All right, so I'm going to close these polls and I'm going to turn it over to Ruth as we start to think about what does all this mean of who you are, your roles, where you're working, and what does that mean in terms of mentoring in the current moment?
Thanks, Chris, and hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be spending this time with all of you. Before we start digging into transitions, I just want to encourage all of you. We have over 100 of us here together. And I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to learn together. But I also fully recognize that it's not going to be possible for everyone to wait until the end to ask their questions. So if you need more time, if something we said or a slide you see, really something resonates with you about it, while it's top of mind, please put it in the Q&A and we're going to try to get to it at some point before the end. So I don't want you to think that you have to wait till the very end. So like Chris, I am really excited to be working together with Chris. I was a fangirl for a very long time of her work, and we just started collaborating recently. And this is really where I'm excited, where the sum is really greater than the individual parts when we're able to work together. So a conversation led to this. And it led to this idea of, all right, we got through year 1 of COVID, but now we're in year 2, and there are more transitions that are happening. Now, I remember 17 years ago, someone told me that I was making a mistake because I had a child and I was moving all at the same time. And they say, you never do 2 high stress things at the same time. But really, what's been going on in the last year? Well, we had a pandemic as our foundation. Plus, we had civil unrest. Plus, we had political uncertainty. Plus, we have forest fires on the West Coast and floods on the East Coast, and start of the new year that's starting and stopping and starting and stopping. Some of us are at work, some of us are not at work. Somehow we all need to play together. It has just been a whirlwind, and we don't know when it's going to stop. So I was told not to do 2 high stress things at the same time, but now we're really dealing with a lot of those high stress things at the same time. So we really need to come up with a game plan, because this fire drill that we've been doing on, off, is just not working. We need something a little bit more sustainable. Chris, next slide, please. So I want to ask you, as of today, and I realize this can change day to day or week to week or month to month, as of today, Monday, September 13th, what is your stress level right now as it comes to related to starting the new semester, the new season? What is your stress level right now? Is it no problem, I got this? Or is it I can't sleep? I can't get any work done. I can't complete a thought. I have brain fog. Where are you from the normal to the severe? Or maybe you're not sure. This is all anonymous, but if you prefer not to share, that's okay too.
All right, we're just at about 80%, Ruth, so I'll end and share in a moment.
Beautiful. Now we're all adults, so adults all have opinions, and here is your opportunity to share those. All right, how are we doing?
All right, I have just shared the results. Can you see them?
This is a perfect bell curve. So we have most of the people, 2/3 of our participants here have either a mild or moderate level of stress, meaning they are not able to do effective work for sustainable periods of time. Some people are having trouble sleeping. They don't feel like socializing, even if they're extroverts. We do have quite a number that have severe stress leading up to anxiety and panic and insomnia. And there's some who are able to carry on every day, no problem. And it's okay. Some people are also not sure how they would label themselves, and that's okay as well. But that is the perfect bell curve. Next slide, please. Now, this is really, it's as if you knew what the next slide would be, because this is how this group here, the 100+ people who are here today, are actually functioning. But you know, there's actually been some research that we actually need a certain level of stress just to function and be effective. One of my good friends, Aisha, who is a product designer, she often tells me that creativity comes with constraints, right? That's why deadlines are so important. We need those constraints. But sometimes those constraints become too tight and too much. And it becomes very difficult to learn how to work with that, and it no longer becomes productive. So based on where you fell on that little survey that we just had in the previous slide, I want you to see where you are here on this actual stress curve. If you are at the too little, you know, that might mean that you need a new challenge. If you're at the optimum stress, which is where I said you need some stress to be effective, that's fantastic. But there's a tipping point where you start really going downhill. It becomes just too much. Your brain is on overload. You stop being effective. You stop being creative. And then it really gets bad when there's that insomnia and that anxiety and that lashing out and that anger. Next slide, please. Now, I think we need to accept that stress and transitions are going to occur in our lives. Nobody expected that we would have so many at the same time, but we can't simply deny their existence. But we need to know where we fall with the levels of stress and how that they can impact the relationships that we have, including our mentoring relationships. So very often, you know, as either the mentor or the mentee, and I am of the belief that you should always be both a mentor and a mentee. If somebody is yelling or acting out or lashing out, there's usually an underlying problem. You just happen to be there at the receiving end. They're yelling at you, or you're yelling at them, but it really is, there's an underlying stressor that's there. You just happen to be the one who's receiving it. So you need to think about the level of stress and the impact it could have on the relationship. So the toxic ones, right? We've all seen it, we've all heard it. You know, when you have multiple grant deadlines and you have papers due all at the same time, and a mentor is nowhere to be found, and you can't get somebody to review aim number 2, it's just your head is about to explode. And just as you're about to submit a grant, the internet falls, and you know that level of stress, right? It's not good. And if it happens day after day after day after day, it can become absolutely toxic. Now, sometimes we have temporary stresses, right? I always tell when I work with students, I said, finals week is not forever. It's just for the week. So knowing that it has an end date is what becomes so helpful. And that's what's been so difficult with what we're dealing with lately, because we don't know what the end date will be. Now, again, there is that positive stress that we've been talking about as well, because that is what actually makes us effective and creative. Chris, back to you. Oh, no, I have one more, sorry. So in those relationships, and as I was saying, when people are at that high stress, those dangerous levels of stress, they're unable to recognize how their words and their emotions are impacting other people. They are not in control of that at all. And also they have trouble understanding, this is where the emotional intelligence takes a big dip, because they have trouble making those judgments about how other people are seeing things and viewing things and really putting themselves in somebody else's shoes. That becomes very, very difficult during high stress situations. Now, Chris, back to you.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, so I think you can see Ruth and I just, wanted to take a couple minutes to acknowledge the current context of disruption, to acknowledge the constant stress that folks find themselves in, that there is a range and it is changing about how we're dealing with things, and those impact our performance. And it impacts our relationships, both in the way that those relationships can be helpful and buffer that stress, as well as our ability to engage in them in emotionally intelligent, productive, supportive ways. And that impacts us as mentors and mentees, and those that are supporting programs and the mentoring relationships, as well as other relationships in those programs. So especially during times of stress, even though it seems so hard to take on more work, to be more reflective, to slow down, it's the most important time to be slow down and to be intentional as we increase the awareness of wellness and the need for it, and the salience of things like cultural diversity in our mentoring relationships, to be proactive. And so proactive can take on lots of different forms. It can be really micro things, can be very meta things. And so what we'd like to do today is to give some approaches that might be helpful, as well as some advice, as well as to hear from you. And we hope that you can pull some of those nuggets into your own practice to help you wherever you are. Some of you may be doing spectacular in navigating your mentoring relationships and supporting them. Great, share your tips with us. Some of you might be saying, I barely can figure out how to meet with my mentor or mentee or support those relationships, let alone make sure that they're supportive and productive. So the first thing we're going to do is draw on an article that I had the pleasure of working on with my colleagues, Dr. Janet Branshaw, Dr. Angela Virus-Winston, Dr. Steve Lee, and Dr. Bruce Viren, and Dr. Melissa McDaniels. We worked together to just kind of say, okay, we don't have to throw everything we know about our mentoring relationships out the door because we're under stress. Let's use what we know and just reframe how we can use this moment to reassess, realign, and reimagine our relationship. So it's not rocket science. It's taking a moment to step back into a collaborative process. So really important to reflect on the attributes of both in-person and remote mentoring relationships, and just take a moment and go, what's working, what's not working? And then realign. We cannot pretend that we can have the same goals we had 18, 19 months ago. There's no way. Everything's changed. And we don't know when it's going to change again, and it's never going to go back to what it was. So that's going to take a realignment of our goals and a recommitment to maintain the aspects of our relationship and our work that's going well, and improve the ones that are not. Everything might have been going great 2 years ago. If it was going great 2 years ago, it probably pivoted. Doesn't mean it got bad or got better, but it changed. It had to, because everything changed, and it's continuing to change. And then we might have reimagined. There, despite the fact that we've been under enormous stress, you hear so many stories of things that came forward that were unexpected. People saying, I got to know people better because I got to see them in their home when we were on Zoom. We had discussions we never had before. Or I spent time slowing down and thinking, and I ended up being productive in a different way. And so there's ways to reimagine what our mentoring relationships and how to support those relationships can be. So let's give you an example of what this might look like. To take a moment as a mentor or mentee or someone working with mentoring relationships and say, okay, coming into this semester or season, what has been working well? What hasn't worked well? When did I feel like we were on the same page? When did I feel like I understood where you were coming from? And when did I feel disconnected? When did we have misunderstandings? What do we want to continue to use? So if you were hybrid, but now you're on site, or you were on site and now you're moving hybrid, or now you're all on site, but you were doing in your mentoring relationships, you were tag teaming with other people in the group to keep the number of people in the lab low, but now you're all there. What communication strategies need to be realigned because it's changed again? And then reimagine. What do you want to prefer? What preferred communication moving forward? At what frequency? What's our ideal response time? Might have been one thing over the summer, and now it's a whole different thing coming into this semester. So again, this is a moment to just sit down with one another and say, what's working, what's not working, how do I want to realign, and what do we want to reimagine based on where we've come in the last 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, so on. Some tools that can be really useful: scheduling those regular meetings or maintaining them with co-constructed agendas. What do we want to get out of our time together? I know one thing that has worked for a lot of people is they decided to start using the first 10 minutes of their time together to just check in. They said, now we spend the first 10 minutes checking in how one another are doing, our wellness, what's happening in our world. We absolutely want to keep that on our agenda. Like, I never want to go back to not doing that. Practicing active learning regardless of venue, and understanding that when you switch from face-to-face to remote or a hybrid, it changes the way you can listen. And so being aware of that. Using asynchronous documents, because back to what Ruth was sharing, it's hard to focus right now, is even when we're in the mild stress condition. Having things you can go back to when your mind is a little clear is hyper important right now. And you might want to do a communication inventory. Even if you've done one before about your style, it's probably likely your style has changed a bit based on the way we've had to communicate in the last year or two. And I think the most important thing is, and Ruth really highlighted this in her 2020 article, is listen, don't fix. So as this excerpt from that article says, as in all mentoring relationships, and especially during this time of heightened stress, it's not your role to fix a trainee's problem. This is speaking to you as mentors. And mentees, it's not your responsibility to fix your mentor's problems. Acknowledge the full range of emotion and let each other know that what you're feeling is natural and acceptable, and that you're going to come up with solutions together. We can barely fix ourselves. We cannot take on fixing everything for everybody else. And I think we have to acknowledge that. So another example, if you apply this to a domain of equity and inclusion, is really thinking about what we've done before to help foster connections and a sense of belonging in the research group. How do you stay connected when we're changing modes of understanding and communicating in environments, and things that are making it challenging? And then what are new ways? If people have started in some ways feeling more disconnected, there's other examples where they feel more connected to each other. How do we reimagine that and continue to grow from that? So again, these are just some examples of how to take a moment at the beginning of a new season semester to reassess, realign, and reimagine. And then the other thing we wanted to bring in is to really remind folks that we really need to attend to psychosocial needs. And I saw a question just come in that we'll get to the end. Really important to check in about cognitive and emotional load and how you're handling all of the things, civil unrest, things that are going on in terms of weather, family pressures, health. Check in and see how things are being handled, because you might have a task list that you are just, we got to get to this. But if someone's coming into that in a place of extreme stress and anxiety and what they're handling it, I don't care how important the task list is, it's going to be pretty impossible to get it done. So we may have to reprioritize. Asking those open-ended questions, avoiding just like, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm okay. Okay. What's on your mind? What's salient to you today? What's the biggest challenge you're struggling with today? Looking for those subtle changes in behavior, appearance, and responsiveness. I can say for the folks I work with, I'm so grateful to them, because they'll say, wow, you seem a little short today, or a little distracted. What's going on? Because they're paying attention that I might not be at the top of my game today. And then doing those wellness checks. What are you doing to keep yourself grounded? What are you doing to take some time for yourself? What are you doing to relax, exercise, breathe? So remember, listening and not fixing, and attending to the psychosocial needs. So I'm going to pause here and just again to say that this is more of just kind of thinking through different themes in the mentoring relationships and how you can use a process to check in, to realign, and then reimagine. And again, then really tending to things like listening and those psychosocial needs and those cultural contexts. So Ruth, anything that you'd like to add before we move into some other suggestions we want to highlight that I know you and I dove into when we worked on the most recent article we published?
Absolutely. You know, I was thinking about all of the posts that I saw this weekend about what people did on 9/11 and the day after and 2 days after, once they were hit with that shocking news. And I was thinking back to what I was doing on 9/11 which led me to a post that I saw by a Harvard Business Review professor. On 9/11, after I heard what happened and our phones weren't working and our internet was down, I'm in New York City, and we didn't know what was happening, I quickly had to go into a mode of control what you can control. Nothing out there was in my control, none of it. And I started doing, and I realized that this is actually what many people do, is to work on what they can control. And the only thing that I was able to control at that moment was the processing of admissions applications. And I was head down. So it's the flip version of what we're saying. Some people under high stress cannot get anything done. Some people need to be able to focus on one thing so that they don't need to think about the other things that are happening that are out of their control. So I think having that buffet of options for people to choose from is really critical.
Such a good point. Yeah, I tend to use that strategy myself. It's okay, I'm just going to pick one. And then I'll reward myself. If I get through that one, I can watch something on Netflix for 30 minutes so I can just forget about everything. We all have, these strategies. All right. So Ruth and I wanted to take a moment, and Randy, I saw, did this in the chat, and you're welcome to use the chat, is what approaches to your mentoring relationships have you found helpful in the past year? And these can be as mentee or mentor. And for the large number of folks here today who support mentoring relationships, maybe it's what you've seen. You've seen mentors and mentees doing that have been helpful or surprising, unexpected. We're going to give folks a minute or two to share in the chat. We recognize with the large number of people, you're not going to be able to read them all. Don't worry. We have plans to grab the list, clean it up, and work with the NRMN resource team to post that list. So what kind of things have you found helpful? And again, you can use the chat for this. And you can either send it to everyone or to the hosts and panelists, whatever you like, we will capture it all. Thanks, Andrew. And in case folks are wondering if people are sharing things, some people are sharing just with the hosts and panelists, so we'll just see those, Ruth and I, and others are sharing with everyone. And again, don't worry about it, we'll capture them all. Seeing a lot of flexibility, checking in on the feelings, making time for meeting, even when it feels stressful to put another meeting on the books. Yeah.
These are all fantastic.
Yeah. Getting to know people's pets. Oh my gosh, pets have been a lifesaver.
A friend of mine, Christopher Littlefield, recommends that when you have, for example, lab meetings or any group Zoom, before you jump into the agenda, you actually ask people to type in on a scale of 1 to 10 how they're doing today. And anybody who's below a 6 or 7, you actually reach out to them after the meeting to check in.
Nice. Anahid, and I don't know if I said your name correctly, but love the reference to Frozen 2. Appreciate that. Yes, singing advice, love it.
Oh, I like Steve's recommendation of Zooms being for less than an hour.
Yeah, give that transition. We do that on our team. We try to give 10 minutes of transition because you don't have to walk between meetings, and it matters. Yeah.
I need to fill up the coffee.
Yeah, I like including the time to decompress. I would love to start putting things on our calendar that says decompression time. Just name it. I think I'm going to try that. Add decompression time to my calendar.
I hope you can do it on command, Chris.
Thank you. We'll keep sharing. These are wonderful suggestions. I'm going to turn it over to Ruth, who's going to take us through some of the highlighted suggestions that we pulled together recently to share those with you. And again, please keep sharing and we'll continue to pull this list together.
So one of the benefits, one of the silver linings of this last year and a half is that I got the guts to reach out to people whose work I really admired. And that led to collaborations that I don't think ever would have happened before. And one of them has really been that Chris and I started to work together, because I think when you collaborate, you really join forces, but you also learn quite a bit in the process. So there's so many other opportunities and things that can develop out of these mentoring relationships. And I think besides a collaboration, I think we've developed some peer mentorship as well. So if anybody has other suggestions that they would like to include throughout, please continue to put them in the chat. You certainly do not need to stop just because I started talking. So please continue so that we can all learn from each other. Now, one of the things is to finally, now that people are just coming out of this frozen time, is to actually start planning in-person interactions. But I want to tell you what happened on Saturday night. My husband and I actually went out to our first social event in the last year and a half, and it was half a dozen couples, and we were meeting outside. And this was really the first time for almost all of us getting together. And these are people that we used to see on an almost weekly basis. None of us knew what to do with each other. We just stood there. Are we allowed to stand so close? We're not allowed. What do we talk about? What is off limits to talk about? Can we take the mask off to eat, not take it off? These are people that we have eaten many meals in their homes. They've eaten meals in our homes. We would go on vacations together, and we did not know what to do with each other after seeing each other. We didn't know how to talk. We didn't know how to engage. When people pulled chairs, who could sit, who shouldn't sit, the whole thing was completely foreign to us. It's as if we were strangers. We were so used to doing the parallel play that you often see with children in a sandbox that we forgot how to interact with other people. And it was really sort of this out-of-body experience being there. Now, my husband and I actually both go into the office to work. So this is what really shocked us, that while at work we were fine, socially we didn't know what to do when we were around other people. So understand that if certain people are coming back to the labs for the first time at full capacity, they may be doing that parallel play, or as Chris was talking about before, that tag play. My shift is over, you're up next. And knowing how to work together again is something that needs to be relearned. So there has to be some time spent on learning how to do that and developing those group dynamics as well. And remember, people haven't been around for a very long time. They haven't been around each other. So it can be a little awkward. It could be a little disorienting. People haven't seen some of these people in person, maybe ever, and maybe for the first time in a long time. So you have to really create some of those activities so that people can just relax each other around each other. And it's going to take time. The next time that I'm going to go out to a social event, I know it's going to be just a little bit easier and a little less awkward. And it's going to be the same thing for people when everyone starts coming back to the offices and to the labs. Now, realize that what worked in the past may not work now, not just because of COVID, but because of we just don't want to do that anymore, right? So having all these meals that we used to have, right, every time somebody published a paper may not be an option right now anymore, especially if somebody also has to run back to work, run back home because there's still a child who is home and doing Zoom school for another year, because there's still some people who are still doing that. So we have to understand that what worked in the past may not work again, and we may need to come up with some new activities. New slide, please. So this is a time to really realign the expectations that we've had in the past and recognize that our relationships, our mentoring relationships, and our productivity is a moving target. And we need to understand that. We can't ignore it. We have to embrace our vulnerabilities and just expect it to actually happen. So a periodic review of the productivity and expectations is important, and understanding that we need to be honest in sharing the concerns about the deadlines to finish the experiments and present the results and write or complete the manuscripts that we have to work on. We also have to learn how to manage challenges and expect the unexpected. It just has to happen. So consider writing and revisiting the shared expectations, and know that you're going to have to revisit it multiple times. Next slide, please. Whoops, this is the time to really reassess our goals. If you would have told me a year and a half ago that I would be having a book coming out, I would have thought that you were crazy. That wasn't a goal of mine a year and a half ago. But at some point, about 6 months into the pandemic, it very much became a goal of mine. So whatever goal people had in the past may not be the goal that they have now. So this is really the time to revisit that and look at what you can do to help the new goals come to fruition. Now, for those of you who have IDPs, individual development plans, your mentees have IDPs, this is a time to dust it off and look it over again and see, are there new goals that need to be reimagined, new timelines that need to be enforced, and celebrate those small wins along the way. And just meet up to discuss what priorities have changed, what goals have changed, what new things your mentee might want to do, and what are the new things you might want to do. Next slide, please. I just want all of you to remember that everyone's watching you. Your mentors are watching you, your mentees are watching you as well. And it's okay for you to say, I can't do anymore. I am just burnt out. Because by you being vulnerable and you being authentic as a mentor and you being open and honest and transparent about exactly what it is you can handle and what you're going to do instead because you can't handle that other thing, that actually gives permission for your mentees to do the same. So instead of trying to live up to these expectations that really nobody has, by being vulnerable and transparent and letting people know where you are and what you can handle, that will give permission as well. And that'll just create a whole new norm within the lab and within the workplace. Now, if there are any other resources that you think are helpful for people, and understand that adults learn in different ways. So if there's a book or a podcast or a YouTube video, right? Maybe somebody would enjoy this webinar that we're having now, or the endless books or endless podcasts, or they want to talk to a professional person or another mentor, develop a mentoring team, be sure to share that. Be sure to share that information. That'll be really helpful to them as well. And finally, you need to focus on what matters most. That's both to the mentor and the mentee. And some of the things that we really discussed already include making time for regular meetings and those personal check-ins. And there's so many different ways that you can do that. We now learn that mentoring does not need to happen at a prescribed time with a prescribed agenda and always fixed. A quick text could go a very, very long way. You need to invite other people to share and be open. Don't assume that you understand what another person, what is weighing on them. Because most people, we're quite closed and we don't always bring what's happening in our personal lives with us to work. A lot of people have had an enormous amount of loss in the last year and a half, and an enormous amount of stress, either taking care of children, taking care of parents, flooded home, burned down homes, whatever it is. And they don't always bring that with them to work, and you have no idea. So ask, don't always assume. And sometimes listening is really all they want. They just want to unload. They just want to have someone hear what they're going through. And sometimes that's all that's needed. They're not looking for you to fix it. They're not looking for you to fix it. They just want you to hear them out. And part of that is really part of that emotional intelligence of putting yourself in their shoes and understanding their perspective. Now, I had a group coaching session and everyone was telling me that their mentor is somebody who doesn't sleep and works all the time. I'm not sure that's sustainable for very much longer. So just be sure to slow it down, take care of yourself, put your mask on first before you put the mask on others so that you can really be fully present and fully able to help them out. Now, my trainee, Dr. Alex Perez, who is an anesthesiology resident now at UCSF, when I was talking to him at the beginning of the pandemic, he said to me, this situation requires human kindness and empathy. Maybe mentorship here is just realizing the humanity in each of us and being there as equals with one another through an uncertain time. And I really do think that this time of multiple transitions is really the time that has really leveled the playing field in the mentoring relationships.
Thanks, Ruth. So we want to leave, and in our own spirit of mental health and wellness, we are going to end at 5 minutes to make sure we can transition. But for the next 9 minutes, we want to open it up for discussion. Already I see one question, I see some things in the chat. We'll raise those up in a minute, but give folks a moment. And if you are not quite sure, like, oh, I don't know what I want to say or ask, we have some starting prompts here, again, for either the Q&A or the chat is, something you resonated with, or you thought interesting, or something you were like, I had a very different experience, are also things we'd love to hear. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides just so we can really focus on the chat and so I'm going to move that over. And Ruth, I'm going to invite us both, and I'm sure we can do this, in looking at both the chat and looking at the Q&A. I do see one thing that Anna has, let's see, this is from Anna Fershman. Just chatted to us, but I wanted to raise it up, is Anna's asking if there's any tips for the standard, say something positive that happened to you at the start of a meeting, because they find that particularly difficult and stressful when they've had a really bad time to have to pull something positive. So are there other openers that allow people to be authentic to what they're experiencing? If you're like, I had a hellish week and I have nothing positive, don't make me do that, even though the optimist in me says, that's good for you. So opening that up to the community, if you have other openers for Anna that won't force somebody to find a silver lining if they just feel like this is not the week to find one.
It's so funny that this was raised, because I counted every small win as a win. And for me, I stopped talking about, I wrote a draft of a paper, I revised a paper, I submitted a grant. First of all, nobody wants to hear that, especially if they weren't able to do that. And frankly, I was not in the headspace to talk about revisions of papers or grants. But for me, if I was able to fold the laundry, to me, that was a major accomplishment. And I was okay with sharing that. And once I did that, that just opened the floodgates where people were talking about all of these things that they had to start doing. And especially if they weren't used to doing them before on a regular basis, that the fact that you can start doing that and getting those things done, going back to control what you can control, that opened up the floodgates for everyone else to stop talking about the grants and papers and start to talk about, I actually went out for a walk today. I actually got my grocery shopping done before there was just one tomato left in the fridge. I was able to unload the dishwasher. I was able to get my 4th grader through their math homework. Whatever that is, those are wins as well, because those are the added pressures that we didn't necessarily have before, or not at this rate anyway.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some great suggestions in the chat, again, that will capture about, something you overcame, something, I like to say, like, what was, something memorable from the week. I'm not making a judgment of if it's positive, negative, just something that's stuck with you. Something that you're still thinking about from last week, stuck in your head. Steve Lee, sharing like, for the in-person meetings is watching a funny parody video. Obviously, you always have to be sensitive about things that those can trigger, but they can give you a common ground, at least to laugh and go, yeah, that's awkward. And use humor, which can work for some. I'm a big fan. And again, no introductory activity, no single comment, no video is going to work for everyone. But I think it's back to the transparency about the reason I'm doing this. The reason I'm asking you this is so that we can take a moment and acknowledge where we're all coming from. The reason I'm sharing this video with you is because it's going to be awkward. So is to not leave things to assumptions, is to be transparent about why you're engaging time in hearing people, listening to people, the sharing, the group dynamics, the focus on humanity, that you're doing this for very concrete, intentional reasons. The same way that you would be trying to craft teaching someone a new skill in the research lab. You as mentors in particular, and people who support mentoring relationships, the power you have in shaping the learning environment is enormous. And so what you do, what you model, how you think about the activities you engage in and the transparency can have huge impact. So
Chris,
thanks
I do want to share that this is actually a great opportunity to start knowing the personal side of the people who you work with, where we've never had that before, and we've never had those vulnerabilities before, but maybe this is our time to be kinder and softer and gentler. So some other icebreakers to really start meetings is, where is your favorite vacation destination? It doesn't have to be a place, but what would that environment be? Or what's your latest book recommendation, right? Or what is the favorite movie that you have just seen? And this way you actually get to know people, and that also gives some of the quieter people in the group a way to interact. So for example, if I'm going to say that my favorite movie is Star Wars, and your favorite movie is Star Wars, when you actually see me, you know that you can talk to me about Star Wars. In real life, don't talk to me about Star Wars, but that is a trigger for somebody who does find that connection.
Yeah, and I know that there are some lists of wonderful openers, and maybe the Resource Center can pull some of those together as well as some of these. I think those are a wonderful resource. I do know in a short time, there are a couple questions coming into the Q&A, which I know folks can't see in the chat, that I want to raise up, and some are echoed in the chat, is about, okay, great, but what about the mentors who aren't here, don't seem to be adopting these strategies, don't seem to want to engage in the humanity and being empathetic and rethinking goals? And that's tough. The mentors, people who, are speaking into, I know, Lisa, you posted this, is what about the students and postdocs who are working with PIs who won't focus on well-being and humanity? And so those are really important points. I think part of the reason Ruth and I wanted to do this was to say like, I found this interesting. You want to watch this. I'm not saying it's going to change them. And that's certainly hard. I think that in those cases, there is certainly, trying to get mentors to rethink. And I think mentorship education, things like that can help. I think as mentees in those situations, if you are on those situations, it's what can you do proactively from a mentee training or mentoring up perspective to proactively take care of yourself, to try to push on that a little bit, obviously within bounds. And so, stating that, mentors are saying like, everything looks fine, get back to work, we can do it, is to find ways to say, here's where that's going to be a challenge. I think IDPs could be helpful in saying, I need to revisit this, because in the context of everything going on, while some may be able to just jump back in, I'm not able to do that, and I need to work through a strategy. So that's really difficult. It's especially difficult because I think it's pretty unlikely that any mentor isn't experiencing this, and getting them to recognize that the stress they're experiencing and how that affects their performance and their engagement is impacting their engagements with you as mentees, but I recognize the difficulty in that. And I do feel for everyone who's having to navigate relationships where that's not even on the table for discussion. It's not a satisfying answer, but, you know, as someone who dedicates their whole career to mentorship education, I think, you know, we continue to try to push on this. Another thing that came up again, and we're going to end in a minute, is when your mentor looks so crazy busy, you don't want to bother them. Really important, and especially in this time. And I think another reason why having a conversation about realigning expectations and just simply saying, can we have a conversation about the expectations we have for one another and what you're able to respond to and what I am given the current context. What I can tell you is that what I often end up saying is, I know I look like my schedule's crazy. I don't want that to be your responsibility. It's mine. And that doesn't mean stop asking me, but I didn't know I had to say that. So there are lots of other great ideas. We want to honor the 5 minutes. I'm really hopeful that we can continue to work with the Resource Center to continue to collect some of these questions and resources. I know there was one about mental health and wellness for students, and we'll try to get the Resource Center some things they can post on that as well for the community. So we are going to end things here, Johnny. I think you're going to close it out. And it was really wonderful to have you all here today.
Yes, no, thank you, Dr. Pfund, and thank you, Dr. Gotian, very much for participating in this webinar. This is such an important discussion, and we look forward to hosting more webinars in the series. But yes, that's it for today. Thank you all for attending, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Bye, everybody.